There are moments in astrology that feel temporary, like weather patterns passing through the emotional atmosphere of your life. And then there are moments like this, moments that divide reality into before and after. What unfolds today is not subtle, and deep down, part of you already knows that. Something in your spirit has been restless for weeks, maybe even months, as if your inner world has been sensing an approaching collision long before your conscious mind could explain it. On Wednesday, May 6th, 2026, at exactly 8:30 in the morning, Pluto comes to a complete stop at 5 degrees and 30 minutes Aquarius, and that stillness carries more force than movement ever could. Because Pluto does not whisper when it stations retrograde. It concentrates, it intensifies, it locks its attention onto the hidden layers of human consciousness with the same relentless pressure as light magnified into flame. This is the planet associated with death, rebirth, psychological excavation, buried truth, and irreversible transformation. And when it freezes at this exact point in the sky, the emotional walls you have relied on for survival begin weakening from the inside out. The version of yourself you carefully constructed to feel safe can no longer fully contain what has been trying to emerge beneath it. The frightening part is not that the truth is appearing. The frightening part is realizing how long you have been carrying it in silence. Many people will try to treat this as just another retrograde, another astrological headline that comes and goes. But this energy is far more personal than that. This is a confrontation between you and the parts of yourself you have spent years avoiding. Over the next 6 months, the universe is not interested in surface-level change. It wants honesty. It wants accountability. It wants you to stand face to face with what your soul has outgrown. And if you have recently felt emotional heaviness for no visible reason, if quiet moments suddenly feel louder inside your own mind, if there has been an unexplainable pressure sitting in your chest when nobody else is around, it is because this transit is already working on you. Something unresolved has been trying to reach your awareness, and Pluto retrograde is removing your ability to keep pushing it back into the shadows. But to understand why today feels so emotionally charged, you have to look at what has been building beneath the surface since April, because this retrograde station is not the start of the story. It is the moment the emotional pressure finally becomes impossible to contain. Think back to April 3rd, when Venus squared Pluto. That was not random tension. That was the beginning of exposure. Relationships, money, attachment, emotional dependency, self-worth, every one of those themes was placed under an unforgiving light. Some people began recognizing manipulation they previously excused. Others started noticing how power dynamics had quietly infiltrated their closest connections. For some, financial control revealed itself in ways that felt deeply uncomfortable. That uneasiness you felt back then was not paranoia. It was the first fracture in a reality that could no longer sustain illusion. Then, as the middle of April unfolded, Mars and Mercury formed supportive alignments to Pluto, and suddenly insight became sharper. Conversations carried hidden meaning. Silence between words became revealing. Information that had been buried started finding its way into the open. And for a brief period, many people felt a strange mixture of fear and clarity at the same time. You may have noticed yourself becoming less willing to tolerate what was draining your energy. You may have found courage appearing in unexpected moments, courage to detach from situations that once held emotional power over you. But the emotional intensity escalated dramatically on April 25th, when the Sun squared Pluto. That transit was not gentle. It forced a direct collision between identity and transformation, between the person you believed yourself to be and the person life has been demanding you become. It exposed the gap between your outer image and your deeper truth. And only hours after that square, Uranus entered Gemini for the first time in decades, revolutionizing communication, intellect, technology, and collective perception all at once. That shift created the sensation that two timelines were overlapping, one collapsing while another struggled to fully emerge. Many people have felt mentally overstimulated ever since, as though reality itself has been moving faster than their nervous system can process. Then came the Scorpio full moon on May 1st, and that lunation acted like a direct emotional amplifier for Pluto itself. Scorpio is ruled by Pluto, which means that full moon became a mirror reflecting every unresolved emotional attachment back into your awareness. If memories resurfaced unexpectedly, if old wounds reopened, if emotions you thought were buried suddenly became overwhelming, there was a reason. That lunation illuminated resentment, obsession, grief, suppressed anger, toxic attachments, and the hidden aspects of your identity that you learned to exile in order to survive. It was not punishment. It was revelation. And now Pluto stations retrograde, marking the official descent inward. This is the part most people misunderstand about Pluto retrograde. When Pluto moves direct, transformation appears external. Governments shift, systems collapse, structures decay, and collective reality visibly changes shape. But during retrograde motion, the spotlight turns inward. The external noise quiets just enough for you to hear what your soul has been trying to say underneath it all. Pluto begins asking questions that cannot be avoided. What are you still trying to control because you are terrified of uncertainty? What truth keeps resurfacing no matter how hard you suppress it? What emotional pattern have you mistaken for safety simply because it feels familiar? From May 6th until October 15th, this energy continues pressing against every emotional defense mechanism that no longer serves your evolution. This is not a punishment cycle. It is a retrieval process. Pluto retrograde drags hidden power back to the surface, especially the parts of yourself you abandoned because they felt too dangerous, too emotional, too intense, or too real. Many people will resist this process. They will tighten their grip on control. They will become more defensive, more rigid, more reactive, and then wonder why their lives feel like they're collapsing around them. But if you are hearing this message right now, your path through this retrograde is different. You are not being asked to dominate your reality harder. You are being asked to stop mistaking control for power. Because the deeper truth emerging through this transit is that real power does not come from forcing outcomes. It comes from facing yourself without running, and that realization may become the turning point that changes everything from this moment forward. What makes this Pluto station even more unsettling is the fact that nothing about it is accidental. The universe does not freeze a planet like Pluto at a random point in the zodiac without purpose. Every degree carries its own psychological atmosphere, its own spiritual lesson, and the degree where Pluto stops today contains a message that feels almost disturbingly personal once you begin understanding it. Beneath the surface of this retrograde lies an ancient symbol, one that reveals exactly what this next chapter is demanding from you, and once you see it clearly, you may start understanding why your inner world has felt so unstable lately. In astrology, each degree of the zodiac is connected to a symbolic image known as a Sabian symbol. These symbols are not meaningless metaphors or decorative spiritual language. They function more like coded transmissions, revealing the deeper emotional and energetic purpose hidden within a specific point in the sky. Pluto stations retrograde at 5 degrees and 30 minutes Aquarius, which astrologically rounds upward to the 6th degree of Aquarius. And the Sabian symbol attached to Aquarius 6 is deeply haunting when you truly absorb its meaning. A masked figure performs ritualistic acts in a mystery play. At first, the image sounds theatrical, maybe even deceptive, as if the symbolism is warning about false identities or hidden motives. But Pluto never stays on the surface of meaning. Pluto drags everything downward into psychological depth, and when you examine this symbol through that lens, an entirely different truth begins emerging. In ancient mystery traditions, masks were not originally used to hide identity. They were used to transcend it. The moment a participant placed the mask over their face, they were surrendering their ordinary self. They were stepping beyond personal ego and allowing themselves to become a vessel for something larger than individual identity. The ritual mask symbolized access to forces too vast, too intense, and too transformative for the isolated human personality to contain on its own. And this is where the retrograde begins, revealing its first uncomfortable truth. The exhaustion you have been feeling recently may not come from doing too little. It may come from trying to carry too much entirely by yourself. Somewhere along the way, you learned that survival meant becoming self-sufficient, emotionally controlled, endlessly responsible, constantly holding everything together no matter how heavy life became. You convinced yourself that power meant endurance, that strength meant isolation, and that asking for support somehow weakened your authority over your own reality. But this retrograde is exposing how unsustainable that mindset has become. The pressure inside you is increasing because the old version of power you built your life around is no longer aligned with the reality emerging around you. For nearly 15 years, Pluto traveled through Capricorn, a sign associated with hierarchy, institutions, systems of authority, status, ambition, and vertical power structures. Capricorn energy rewards climbing, competing, achieving, and maintaining control from the top downward. During that era, many people unconsciously adapted by becoming harder, more guarded, more controlling, more obsessed with maintaining stability through force and structure. Perhaps you became highly skilled at being dependable. Perhaps you became the one everyone relied on. Perhaps you learned to survive by suppressing vulnerability and carrying responsibilities nobody else could see. But Pluto has now entered Aquarius, and Aquarius operates according to an entirely different model of power. Aquarius dissolves rigid hierarchies. It decentralizes authority. It values networks over pyramids, collaboration over domination, connection over control. And this retrograde is forcing a direct confrontation between those two realities. The reason so many people currently feel trapped in exhausting power struggles is because they are trying to use Capricorn survival strategies inside an Aquarian world that no longer responds to them. Some are trying harder to control relationships that are naturally evolving beyond old dynamics. Others are attempting to maintain leadership through pressure and rigidity, while the collective increasingly rejects those methods. Many are discovering that the more tightly they grip situations, the faster those situations begin slipping away. And emotionally, this creates immense internal tension, because the nervous system mistakes loss of control for danger. That is why this transit feels so personal. It is not only transforming outer structures, it is dismantling the emotional architecture you built around the idea that your worth depends on how much you can manage alone. Pluto retrograde is revealing that true power in this new era no longer comes from standing above everyone else. It comes from understanding your place within the larger network of energy surrounding you. Influence now flows through connection, through contribution, through emotional authenticity, through your ability to help energy move collectively rather than trying to dominate it individually. And this shift affects every part of life, not just leadership or career. It reaches into your relationships, your creative work, your spiritual growth, your emotional identity, and every place where you are still exhausting yourself by believing you must personally hold every structure together. The heaviness you feel is not failure. It is the emotional weight of an old paradigm collapsing, while you are still trying to carry it on your shoulders. This retrograde keeps asking the same question in different forms. Are you finally willing to release the illusion that control equals safety? Are you prepared to stop measuring your value by how much suffering you can silently endure? Are you ready to discover what happens when you stop forcing yourself to survive alone? Because the moment that grip begins loosening, something unexpected starts happening inside you. Energy that was trapped in constant resistance becomes available again. Emotional exhaustion slowly gives way to clarity. And beneath all the fear, another realization begins emerging, one that may completely change how you understand yourself. The parts of you that you spend years suppressing, hiding, or judging may actually contain the very power you have been searching for all along. That is the deeper threshold Pluto retrograde is guiding you toward now, and it is only the beginning of what this descent is preparing to uncover. The moment Pluto turns retrograde, something subtle but deeply unsettling begins happening beneath the surface of human consciousness. The energy reverses direction. What was once expressing itself outwardly through external events, collapsing systems, changing relationships, and visible transformation suddenly redirects inward, and that shift is where this transit becomes intensely personal. Pluto no longer focuses primarily on what is happening around you. It begins penetrating what is happening within you. And because Pluto governs the shadow above all else, this retrograde initiates a descent into the hidden chambers of the psyche, the emotional territory most people spend their entire lives trying not to confront. The shadow is not simply darkness. It is every part of yourself you learned was unsafe to express. It is the anger you swallowed to remain accepted. It is the grief you buried because life demanded you keep functioning. It is the desire you denied because you feared judgment. It is the instinctive, emotional, untamed parts of your nature that were pushed underground so you could become the version of yourself the world would tolerate. Modern culture rewards emotional performance. It teaches people how to appear stable, agreeable, polished, spiritually evolved, and emotionally controlled while quietly disconnecting from the raw truth of their own inner reality. Most people become experts at presenting acceptable versions of themselves, while exiling everything that feels too messy, too intense, too vulnerable, or too dangerous. But what nobody explains is the enormous psychological cost of maintaining that separation. Suppression consumes life force. Keeping your shadow buried requires constant emotional effort, constant self-monitoring, constant internal tension. It is like holding something underwater that naturally wants to rise. The deeper you force it down, the more energy you spend resisting your own truth, and eventually, the exhaustion becomes impossible to ignore. This is the second revelation Pluto retrograde brings forward during these next 6 months. The power you have been searching for outside yourself may actually be trapped inside the very emotions, memories, and aspects of yourself you'll have spent years avoiding. Over and over during this retrograde cycle, buried material will begin resurfacing. Old emotional wounds may reopen unexpectedly. Memories you believed were resolved may suddenly feel emotionally alive again. Traumas you thought you had already outgrown may return in quieter but more psychologically complex ways. Certain conversations may trigger reactions you do not fully understand. Certain people may mirror parts of yourself you thought you had escaped. And when these moments arrive, you will repeatedly face the same internal crossroads. You can continue resisting what surfaces, pretending you are unaffected, convincing yourself you have already healed, or you can finally stop running long enough to truly face what has been waiting underneath your defenses all along. Because the deeper alchemical truth hidden within shadow work is this: integration restores energy. The moment you stop fighting yourself, the energy once trapped in suppression becomes available again. Emotional fragmentation begins healing. You stop leaking life force through constant resistance. Instead of feeling divided between the version of yourself you present outwardly and the truth you hide internally, you begin reclaiming wholeness. And wholeness creates a kind of power that performance never can. Pluto retrograde is not trying to destroy you. It is trying to retrieve the abandoned pieces of your identity that were left behind in darkness during different stages of your survival. Your primal instincts, your emotional honesty, your capacity for rage, passion, creation, destruction, intimacy, intuition, vulnerability, and transformation. The people who resist this process will likely spend the next several months emotionally drained, reactive, overwhelmed, and internally conflicted, because fighting your own unconscious mind creates a constant state of psychological warfare. But the people who choose to move toward what surfaces instead of away from it will experience something radically different. By the time October arrives, they may feel more emotionally alive, more grounded, and more internally aligned than they have in years. Because real power was never found in pretending to be endlessly perfect. Real power emerges when you stop amputating parts of your humanity in order to appear acceptable. It emerges when you allow light and shadow to coexist inside you without shame. It emerges when you stop seeing yourself as either sacred or flawed, and begin recognizing that being fully human contains both simultaneously. And once that internal shift begins happening, another realization slowly starts unfolding, one that completely changes how power itself is understood. The deepest secret encoded within this Pluto retrograde is that personal power alone is ultimately limited. Humanity has been conditioned to see power through an individualistic lens. My success, my manifestation, my healing, my truth, my control. Entire industries have been built around strengthening the individual ego, teaching people that if they optimize themselves enough, protect themselves enough, perfect themselves enough, they can dominate reality through sheer personal force. But Pluto in Aquarius exposes the limitations of that mindset. It reveals how isolating and psychologically exhausting it becomes when everything revolves around maintaining the importance of the separate self. The deeper truth emerging now is that the most transformative form of power is transpersonal. It does not originate solely from the ego. It moves through the individual rather than belonging entirely to the individual. This is the hidden meaning behind the masked figure in the mystery play. The mask was never meant to conceal identity. It was meant to dissolve attachment to identity. In ancient ritual traditions, the participants surrendered their individual self long enough to allow something larger to move through them. And this retrograde is preparing humanity for a similar psychological transition. As long as your actions are driven entirely by ego validation, image maintenance, control, recognition, or personal gratification, your power remains limited to the capacity of one isolated human personality. But when your life becomes connected to something larger than self-preservation, something shifts dramatically. When your creativity serves collective healing rather than personal superiority, when your truth contributes to collective evolution rather than ego performance, when your gifts are shared instead of hoarded, you begin accessing a level of energy that feels far greater than individual effort alone. That is what Pluto retrograde is slowly stripping you down toward now. It is removing attachments to image, status, control, superiority, and personal validation, so it can ask a far more unsettling question beneath all of it. Who would you become if your life stopped revolving around protecting your ego? What would you create if you were no longer obsessed with how others perceive you? What kind of purpose would emerge if you stopped asking how reality could serve your identity and started asking how your existence could contribute something meaningful to the larger whole? This does not mean erasing yourself or sacrificing your individuality. It means understanding that your highest expression as an individual may actually emerge through what you give, build, awaken, and contribute collectively. Because under Pluto in Aquarius, power no longer multiplies through domination. It multiplies through connection, shared evolution, and the willingness to become part of something greater than yourself. One of the biggest misunderstandings people will have about this Pluto retrograde is believing the journey ends once the inner work begins. Yes, this energy may absolutely push you inward for a period of time. You may feel less interested in surface conversations, less willing to perform emotional stability for others, less connected to the noise of the external world. There may be moments over these next months where solitude feels necessary, because your spirit is trying to process truths that cannot fully emerge while you are constantly distracted by outside demands. The desire to retreat is real, and part of this retrograde requires exactly that. You are being asked to enter your own underworld, to examine the emotional layers you normally avoid, to sit with your shadow instead of escaping it. But the deeper transformation does not happen by remaining hidden there forever. The real shift begins when you return from that inner descent, carrying something back with you. Pluto retrograde is not only about confronting darkness, it is about reclaiming power from that darkness and learning how to use it differently than before. When the fragmented parts of yourself begin reintegrating, when the shame surrounding your emotions starts dissolving, when you stop rejecting your own complexity, something profound changes in the way you move through the world. You stop functioning like someone desperately trying to survive in isolation. You stop viewing yourself as a disconnected individual battling reality alone. Instead, you begin understanding yourself as part of a much larger living system. And once that realization settles into your consciousness, your actions begin carrying a completely different energetic weight. Small choices create consequences far beyond what you can immediately see. Conversations begin opening unexpected pathways. Synchronicities start increasing with almost unsettling precision. People, opportunities, and moments begin aligning in ways your logical mind cannot fully explain. Not because you suddenly learned how to force reality into submission, but because you stopped fighting against the deeper current trying to move through your life. You become less focused on controlling outcomes and more focused on participating consciously in the unfolding itself. That is the hidden evolution encoded within the symbol of the masked figure performing ritual acts in the mystery play. The figure becomes powerful, not because of personal dominance, but because they surrender enough ego attachment to allow themselves to become a channel for something greater than individual ambition. And once you begin operating from that space, the kind of influence you access no longer feels limited by personal effort alone. This is why understanding the historical cycle surrounding Pluto in Aquarius matters so deeply right now. The last time Pluto moved through Aquarius was between 1778 and 1798. And during those years, humanity experienced some of the most revolutionary upheavals in modern history. The American Revolution reshaped political identity. The French Revolution challenged monarchy and hierarchy at their core. The Industrial Revolution transformed human labor, technology, and society itself. Uranus was discovered during this same period, symbolizing a massive expansion of collective awareness and disruption. Entire systems of power collapsed, while entirely new models struggled to emerge from the chaos. Humanity rebelled against concentrated authority. Old structures weakened under the pressure of collective awakening. But alongside those breakthroughs came enormous shadow. Violence, hypocrisy, collective rage. Revolutions promising freedom, while simultaneously exposing humanity's unresolved darkness. The reign of terror emerged from the same energy that demanded liberation. Declarations of equality coexisted beside systems of slavery and oppression. Progress and destruction unfolded together, because whenever an old paradigm collapses faster than humanity emotionally evolves, chaos inevitably fills the gap. And now, humanity stands inside a similar threshold again. The parallels are impossible to ignore. Technology is advancing faster than collective wisdom can ethically regulate it. Artificial systems are reshaping human identity, communication, labor, and consciousness itself. Institutions people once trusted are weakening. The tension between individual freedom and collective responsibility continues intensifying across every level of society. Old hierarchies are losing stability, while entirely new structures attempt to emerge from the uncertainty. And within all of this, Pluto retrograde is forcing each person to examine their own relationship to power inside the larger transformation unfolding collectively. This transit keeps asking difficult questions. Are you still trying to dominate reality through control because uncertainty terrifies you? Are you clinging to outdated models of survival that depend on hierarchy, isolation, and emotional suppression? Are you trying to become the ruler of your own isolated kingdom while the universe itself moves toward interconnected evolution? Or are you willing to participate consciously in the larger transformation unfolding across humanity itself? Because, over these next 6 months, Pluto retrograde will expose every area of life still built on manipulation, ego inflation, emotional control, false identity, or power maintained through fear. Those structures will become increasingly unstable. Anything dependent on domination rather than authenticity will begin cracking under pressure. But what is rooted in emotional truth, collective contribution, genuine collaboration, and conscious evolution will strengthen dramatically during this period. And this transformation will not remain purely psychological or spiritual. You are going to feel it physically as well. Many people may notice an unusual heaviness in the chest beginning to intensify, as if emotional pressure is accumulating beneath the surface without obvious explanation. Others may experience exhaustion that rest alone does not fully resolve because the nervous system itself is recalibrating around deeper emotional release. Sudden emotional waves may emerge unexpectedly, tears without a clear trigger, bursts of anger that seem connected to something far older than the present moment. Grief surfacing from places you thought had already healed. Intense dreams may become more common, especially dreams involving authority, survival, entrapment, power struggles, collapse, or being unable to escape confined spaces. Some people may feel mentally slowed down, as though life itself is moving through resistance or emotional fog. Others may notice increased tension stored in the jaw, shoulders, hips, or lower back, because the body often carries suppressed truth long before the conscious mind admits it exists. But these experiences are not signs that something is wrong with you. They are signs that your body is participating in the transformation alongside your psyche. Pluto retrograde works through the nervous system as much as the mind. It slows you down so you can no longer outrun what needs your attention. And now, standing at the beginning of this 6-month descent, the retrograde places a choice directly in front of you. You can continue resisting what is changing. You can attempt to tighten control, maintain old identities, suppress your shadow, refuse vulnerability, and insist on surviving through force the same way you always have. But if you choose that path, this period may feel increasingly exhausting. Power struggles may intensify. Isolation may deepen. Emotional heaviness may grow stronger. Life may begin feeling like constant resistance, because the universe is no longer supporting structures built entirely on fear and control. And that realization may become impossible to ignore as this retrograde continues unfolding.